Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Saturday to you. Tina Brock here at the Idiopathic Ridiculopathy Consortium alongside Bob Schmidt and Erica Holscher. And we are here today to talk to James Jackson, who is the executive producer of Light Thief Productions. And I want to thank all of you for being here again with us today in Zoom. If you're in the Zoom room, feel free to put your questions for James into the chat, and we will definitely get to them today. And if you're on Facebook Live, welcome to you as well. James Jackson is the executive producer of Light Thief Productions, and I have long been a fan of the work he's doing in Philadelphia to make Philadelphia a better place. And I thought it would be a wonderful time, as we have so many challenges and opportunities ahead of us as a city, as a performing arts community, to bring James to the table and talk to him about his life, about his work, and his philosophy that drives what he does. James Jackson, welcome to Into the Absurd.
Sorry about that. Had a momentary glitch of.
I was gonna head back over to Bob and say, Bob, is James there today? Thanks for being on the show. And you work in this bit, isn't it so true that you have, your weekly podcast that you do, and you're doing so much basically television production from your own house, and it's extraordinary what we're able to accomplish. And yet sometimes the simplest things, the magic just isn't quite there at the appropriate time. James, thanks for being here.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I want to focus to start. I was so interested in something you said in your bio about growing up at the feet of an artistic family and learning from them. And I wonder if you could share with us a little bit about your family and their work in the arts, or how you became interested.
So I always attribute in all of my theater bios and anything that I'm doing, my love of the arts to both of my parents. Growing up, it might not have been as obvious to everybody around me what the influences were, but my mother worked in the arts her whole life. After she is a first generation immigrant, she then went to college here and went to an arts college. She joined the military to go get the ROTC program and the what's the name of the money for college.
Yeah.
And then when she left the military, she went to an arts college and graduated there. And I think that's where I get most of my willingness to continue working at something, whether or not I necessarily am fully qualified for it or have the experience to, say, oh no, I can definitely do this. I'll often, just do a thing because I think it's possible, and therefore, if I think it's possible and I can think through it, then I can probably make it happen. And I get that from my mom. But that's the kind of artist she was, and she worked in advertising for her entire career. And she oddly, she retired and then now is basically working in advertising again because she works for the city of Langley in Washington State. And then my dad, my stepdad, he always wanted to be a opera teacher, and he became a mortgage banker instead because he wanted to provide for me and my mother. And always, continued doing opera, continued doing theater well into his later life. And did theater in Pittman. John Morrissini did singing in various South Jersey churches and weddings and stuff like that, and was a mortgage banker other than that. But yeah, so it might not have been so obvious to those who were my friends why he was influential in my artistic career. But yeah, he was always influential in saying, you have the opportunity to do whatever you want. Just do what you want now. And if you make a mistake or if it doesn't work out, you have the rest of your life to make up for it. So
do you think that watching him, though, that duality of, well, I need to provide a living for my family, but I also have this thing that I'm truly passionate about, gave you sort of the go ahead to be able to say, yeah, you can hold art in one plate and you can earn a living in another if that's the way that you need to do it? I mean, since you
I think it actually made me it made me not want to do it that way. It actually made me want to concentrate on my art rather than split my focus. I learned by watching him and the fact that, he was a great opera singer. His voice was fantastic. And that's not, just like me as a son, looking at him as an amazing, example. He was a great opera singer. He won awards and, he was cast in things and, had to miss several opportunities because he was working. And there's at some point there's a rate of return where, we as artists are often expected to multitask and, get a real job, quote unquote, or, do something real while we're pursuing our art. And it just doesn't work. There's a diminishing rate of return. At some point, you realize, I don't actually have the time to put into my work that I need to put in. So, I worked in cube farms. That's my nickname for cubicle work. As a technician, an IT technician, until 2011-ish, and I started doing some freelance work right out of high school. I graduated in '96, so I was doing that multitasking from '96 to 2011, and in about 2011 I just like, this isn't gonna work.
So you figured it out a lot. I think you figured it out a lot sooner than some of us do. And I think the problem is you're in the middle of it. Right, you're in the middle of it and you're doing it and you are making it happen, and it is happening to the degree that you have a degree, there's a degree of accomplishment and success with it. But then what you realize when that time gets freed up is, so this is what the air around it does to inform the thing.
Right.
And that's huge. Why I want to get to the many different places in art that you've been as a producer, as a fashion photographer, as a director, the work that you're doing now with Coffee Talk and everything you're doing with Light Thief. Where did the name for Light Thief Productions come from?
So funnily enough, I have during my career in IT, it was, during the mid to late 90s when people were like most everyone on the internet had a pseudonym, a screen name. And I just didn't really have anything that interested me as a screen name. And I was working for a internet service provider in South Jersey called Snip at the time. And my boss at the time, my direct manager, was JD Thomas. And he's still my friend on Facebook, actually. I don't know if he'll watch this, but I'm going to credit him with it anyway. He turned to me one day and he said, you know, you remind me of the character of a raven. And I was like, I don't understand. And I'm like, you know, I know the raven from, you know, the poem. I know ravens as like real birds, but what do you mean? He's like, no. The Northwest Native Americans worship the raven as a like kind of a demigod. He's a trickster god. He can change, and he can change form from human to raven form, and some legends even have more forms than that, like you know, a swimming form and other things like that. Anyway, long story long. In Northwest Native American mythology, the raven is, like I said, a trickster god, but he does everything he does is for the reason that he doesn't like whatever it is that he's trying to correct a problem when he tricks, when he gets into his trickiness. So you know, he created the tides. This is sorry, it's going to be a long story, but
no, I'm with you.
So in the before times, before there was man, there were all these giants, and they did things like throw the moon around the earth and blow out the clouds with their breath. Well, one of the giants was the man who sat on the tides, and he would sit down on an island in the middle of the ocean, you know, twice a day. And when he sat down, the tide came up, and when he got up, the tide went down. The raven was walking along the beach one day at low tide and found a clam, and he saw these little things crawling out of it, and they were men. And then he walked along a little further and he saw a sea anemone, and there were little things crawling out of that, and they were women. And so he wanted to amuse himself. He was bored, so he picked up the men out of the clam and he put them next to the women, and then you know, they started fighting and fornicating and doing what humans do, and he was really amused. Well, the man who sat on the tides sat down, and the tide came in, and the humans all scurried up the beach, but they were cold and they were sad because they couldn't get to their homes, and they couldn't get to the fish, and the tide stayed high for a really long time, and Raven didn't understand why is the tide just staying up? Why isn't the man standing up? So Raven flew and flew and flew and flew, and he went out to the center of the ocean where the man who sits on the tides lives, and the man just said to Raven he was tired and he wanted to sit. Well, Raven didn't want to deal with that, didn't want to hear that. So he pecked and pestered and bothered the man who sits on the tides, and kept throwing rocks at his head and flying around. And eventually the man got up to smack the Raven. Well, the Raven just flew out of reach and, you know, stayed there within visible range, but out of reach of the man. And the man eventually got bored and sat back down again. Well, the Raven did this for like weeks on end, and you know, possibly years. There's no real sense of time to some of these stories, but he just constantly kept pestering the man on the same schedule and making him stand up, and then waiting until he sat back down, and then going and pestering him again to make him stand up again. Eventually, it just became habit, and the man who sits on the tides started standing up and sitting down on a regular schedule again. So the Raven tricked the man who sits on the tides into creating the tides.
Did your boss, was it your boss?
Yeah, he was a
You said
boss and a
boss,
friend.
did
Yeah.
he tell you this story or did you look it up?
He told me about the trickster portion of
Mhm.
the
And
Raven.
and where does the light thief part come in?
So that's another Raven story.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Raven is also the god who brought light and fire to the world. And that's another long story. I won't get into it too much, but these stories are all online and available. If you look up Haida legends, they're all about. Especially if you look up the Haida Raven legends, there's a lot of great stories.
So was the theory or the place you were coming from with it that you wanted to fix the problem?
Yeah. So uh, I've never been one to sit still when I see a problem, and I think that's what JD was cueing in on. I don't like problems. I don't like, especially if they seem to be something that can easily be fixed. Um, the Raven stole the light and put it into the world because it was being kept out of the world for no good reason. And so, yeah, it's the same kind of thing. We had a problem at work one day. We had some employees that weren't getting paid the same amount, and I
This
was
was the
like,
IT job? Was this the IT
yeah,
job? Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, well, just fix it. I don't understand, what the problem is.
You
um,
remind me of yeah. Uh, yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Just fix it. Just can't we fix this?
yeah, what's the big deal?
Did you fix it?
I pestered and got together a few other people who had been there for a long time to pester the head of HR and the CEO to basically make even payments for everybody across the board that were doing the same job.
Thank you for doing that because I think it, how big is the organization that you
At
were?
the time, the company was 45 people.
Okay, so your voice can be
Yeah.
pretty strong in that. So you took that philosophy into forming Light Thief. Is that the
Yep,
theory? And
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah.
when you set out, were there specific things that you wanted to tackle from an artistic perspective?
Yeah, well, there's a lack of representation for Black, Indigenous, other people of color, people of other minority description. And there's a lack of representation both on screen or on stage and in the executive side and the technical side of both theater and film and um, production in general, the arts in general. And, we often talk about, fixing it, but then it just doesn't get fixed because the people that are in charge don't have any reason to fix it. There's not a whole lot out there that, I mean, I can imagine a different world, where I'm a white guy and I'm sitting on an endowment that somebody basically handed me, and I want to keep making theater that makes me happy for the next 50 years, and then retire and hand that endowment to somebody else. If I'm that guy, nothing in the world is going to make me want to change whatever it is that I've been doing that's brought audience in.
Mhm.
But whatever it is you've been doing to bring audience in isn't necessarily what's going to bring your next audience in. And also, it's been broken for longer than just your generation, and this is the hypothetical, 40, 50 something guy who's sitting on this endowment. so it's longer than your generation. So, there's work to do. Why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you fixing it? So yeah, um, you know, I was working on indie films, and a couple of the people that I was working with liked how I handled things on set, as a director of photography. And they were like, hey, I got like 3 scripts out of working with, on 2 different indie films. I got 3 additional scripts thrown at me, and hey, would you develop these? And so I founded Light Thief, to develop those initially, but then, as those fell through, I started looking for different stories to tell. And those are the stories that aren't told are the more important ones. Like, how many times do we need to, not that Shakespeare's not great, but how many times do we need to produce Shakespeare with frilly collars and, Edwardian furniture sets?
Mhm. When in your bio, you talked about along the way learning how to travel light. And I wonder what that means to you.
Well, it's not super creative. It is very, literal in my world. I've always done a lot of travel, even starting out in freelance photography, and when you're a freelance photo assistant, when you're coming up through the like system that exists, you just have to be ready to go at a moment's notice, and you have to have everything that you will need, because you don't have a lot of money. It's like being an artist in any other field. You don't have a lot of spare cash sitting around to get a bunch of stuff, that you may be missing when you go on set, and you're not going to get paid until you're done the job. So you have to make do with what you have. And so traveling light just means being able to problem solve and being able to literally travel with very little stuff. How many pairs of pants do I need? Maybe one, maybe 2.
Maybe one.
Yeah.
Were you a photo assistant in fashion photography?
Yeah. Starting in 96 or 97, I got some of my first photo assistant gigs, thanks to my mom. It's one of the few instances of like my mom being like, okay, I know my son wants to do this thing, so here's a little help in doing it. So she introduced me to a photographer from New York that she used on a lot of her work, and, as a creative director, and he started bringing me on other gigs. So, at the time she worked for, I believe that's when she was working for Eddie Bauer. She had her own ad agency in California, and she was, the agency that dealt with Eddie Bauer. And I went on an Eddie Bauer gig, and then started working for Talbot's and LL Bean and this and that and the other. And eventually, like the whole thing just becomes, you're gone from home for 6 or 8 weeks straight, like once a quarter. So, you're basically home 1 month out of every quarter, and you're suddenly just gone, and you're going from place to place. And almost everybody, in the fashion world, when a location gets, like, a couple of art directors pick a location for, like, you're shooting, well, this is back in the days of film, so we were shooting 6 months out. That means we were shooting Christmas in July, and we were shooting summer in Christmas, in December. And so, there's very few places in the US that people can go. Like, so to get winter in the middle of summer, you're either going to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or you're going to Vancouver, British Columbia, or there's a couple other places, but like once one art director figures out that this location still has snow or still looks wintry, like literally everyone else in the industry is like, okay, we're going there. And so you'll spend like 3 or 4 weeks hopping from client to client in that same location. And it's the same thing. You can't go home. And this was before digital deposit, so I didn't have cell phone deposit. So I was waiting on checks that were in my mailbox at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you still follow fashion at all? Does it still interest you? I mean, the sort of photography end of it. Is that something that you have?
Yeah. One of my biggest personal clients was a brand called Royal Blue Apparel. They basically picked me to do their brand direction in photography for they've always made clothes and sold business to business. They're carried by like Kohl's and like other discount retailers. And they're a good brand. They make interesting clothes and they make good stuff. But they never sold direct to consumer before. So where, like you have Levi's or, any of those other jeanswear companies that they sell direct to consumer all the time. You can go to their website and order their stuff, etc. And the son of the founder of the company graduated college and decided he wanted to try a B2C line. And that was only, I think the last shoot I did for them was about 3 or 4 years ago. Classic story of a manufacturer. The father still wanted to have control of the company, even though his son, went to college specifically to do what his father wanted him to do, which is take over the company. But when the son tried to do a few creative things to take over the company, the father didn't understand and was like, why aren't we just doing business the same way we've always been doing it? And, so there's always that fight between previous generation and new generation.
What was the most surprising thing you discovered in your time as an assistant in that world?
Surprising thing. I don't know. It didn't really come as too much of a surprise to me. Maybe how small the world is.
The world of fashion photography or the world in general?
Both. The world of fashion photography is made up of 25 to 50 in the US market, 25 to 50 photographers who get used for everything. Like they just go from client to client to client. And it's made up of maybe 300-ish models who also work on everything. They work on all of and that's a really small ecosystem. Like, I know more than 25 people like directly. And so if like 5 of the photographers, a good, quarter of the 1/5 of the people that are out there doing this work. So it's a hard market to break into, but also, it's a fun job and a rewarding job. It was right around. Yeah, I like the travel. It was right around the time when digital was becoming a thing. Like I said, we were still shooting on film. Now there's a lot more digital photographers involved in fashion, and I don't know that the industry has suffered for it so much as it gave license for people to experiment in ways that maybe weren't the most healthy. Yeah, I'll put it that way.
Experiment
with photography
okay.
in ways that were the most healthy.
And when you say healthy, do you mean just not good? Or, I mean,
not good for a variety of reasons. So think back to the era, like in the 80s and 90s, there was always like the heroin chic thing, but
right.
That wasn't so much of a problem because that was, as for photography, because that was art directors picking models that just looked emaciated and, directing photographers to take photography in a specific direction. But then as you went from the 90s to the early 2000s, maybe to the 2010s, that like 20-year period, it was transferring into digital. And when you're shooting on film, there's a real necessity to get it right in camera, quote unquote, is what we would call it nowadays. There's a real necessity, and also to get it right quickly. You have 25, 26 exposures on a roll of film, commercial grade film, positive film. And you might shoot 3 rolls for a single setup. So that's 75 shots. I mean, I regularly shoot like 150 to 300 shots now that I'm using digital for a single setup. And, I come up with good stuff, but there's not as much need to get it right, before taking the shot.
Right. So you can kind of, you wonder if you can sort of move your way through it in a way that's less specific and less rich in the end, if there isn't that air in between each of the shots, maybe.
If there isn't that drive to get it right, like, so, like with live theater, there's a drive to get it right. We go through this whole rehearsal process, like for weeks on end. Sometimes there's more rehearsals than there are performances. And yeah, and you keep doing it and you keep doing it and you keep doing it, right? Shooting on film is a lot like that. You as a photographer or as a photo shoot, you sit there and you look at the scene and you recompose it, and you in the film world, there's the Polaroid. You take Polaroids, you just slip a Polaroid back on the same camera that you're using to shoot the film. You take a bunch of Polaroids, and if somebody's not happy with it, if the art director's not happy with it, if the photographer's not happy with it, the hair and makeup artist, the model, if somebody's not happy with and their aspect of that shot, they'll keep adjusting it before you go to film. So it's a little more setup, a little more care in the beginning, and then you don't have that in the digital world. Sometimes you're just shooting to get it in the can, so to speak, and get it done, and then once you have it done, you look at it again in Photoshop, and it's already digitized, so I can retouch it or airbrush it, or even there's a lot of photographers who just completely don't use real sets anymore. They'll just incorporate digital stuff, and I don't know. I don't know that that's a good experimentation for the art, for the photographer, for the models. Yeah.
Was there ever a time when you thought you wanted to be a fashion photographer?
Oh yeah. That was most of the beginning of my career. I'd still call myself a lifestyle photographer. Um, I still do lifestyle photography. I can still do
Mhm.
branding for a company. I still offer Philadelphia theater companies, branding photography for their plays and stuff. So, the thing I don't do is like events. So, like, I get people contacting me like about weddings or shooting the documentary shots for their theater piece, and I'm like, yeah, that's not what I really do.
So what is it about the branding that you feel is like captures who you are?
Um, it's storytelling. Yeah. Yeah, I just regaled you with the story, but I've always been a storyteller, and like, I don't like doing things that aren't storytelling, or at the very least problem solving. And storytelling and problem solving have similarities. Um, but yeah.
Have you performed?
I don't like to be on stage, but I have performed on stage. I have read, but I like the technical side a lot better.
But you seem to you like to tell stories, right? I mean, it's in your like. Have you done, say, you know, yeah, like storytelling on stage? I mean, even though it's all storytelling on stage, have you ever
The
experimented with that?
the most recent experience of performing is I'm the vice president of the PDC, the Philadelphia Drama Center, and I go to the happy hours, and I'll read characters during that, and you know I have writers that like the way I do that. So um, my problem has always been choreography. I'm not good at remembering choreography.
Hmm.
So whenever I was a young performer, they always try and make you do all the things for some reason. I've never understood this. But we got to choreography, and not only did I already know I didn't like it, I knew I wasn't good at it. And then I tried it anyway, because they always say try things anyway. And I really wasn't good at it. I was so bad at it that the choreographer like literally just gave up and like put me in a back corner of the stage. And I hated it so much. And I've never understood that. Like I've always heard, oh, like you need to be a triple threat to get anywhere with your performance. I'm like, I just want to perform. I don't,
Right,
I don't need to be. I don't need to be on Broadway. I don't need to be a triple threat. I
right.
can sing okay. I can act. Why do I need to know choreography? I don't. My feet just move where they move. I don't need you to tell me where to put them.
Movement can be complicated, particularly, yeah, you know, even as a dancer, it's hard sometimes to pick the steps, and it's just it can be very confusing, particularly if, you know, you're facing the choreographer. It can be challenging. So I want to talk a little bit about Coffee Talk, your weekly podcast, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. And what was the inspiration behind feeling like I'm going to do, this is a problem that needs to be solved?
So the problem that needed to be solved initially was just like the pandemic. Everybody was not keeping in touch. Nobody was talking. Nobody was like I had friends that I were more travel work. I travel to do technical direction for theater, and I have friends in the traveling theater. There's, again, it's a relatively small community. There's a couple hundred people that work on basically every opera show. And one of my good friends is a projection designer for opera, and I literally hadn't heard from her for like 4 weeks, where we literally, during the course of the 3 years previous, we spent maybe like 5 or 6 hours not talking. And I was like, why aren't what, like my phone's really quiet, the house is really quiet, I haven't seen anybody. Where are all the people that I usually talk to? And so it's problem solving that. You know, where do I get this interaction that I don't have?
How did you fare during this last year personally as an artist? Do you feel when you look back on that year? Was it harder than you thought it was going to be? I mean, of course, not being through anything like it, but how did you do?
I would say I fared better than some people. I like being home. Even though I love travel, I also like being home. When I'm not traveling, I'm in my house. I do like to go out on occasion, go to a nice restaurant or whatever with friends. But for the most part, unless I'm showing somebody around the city, I don't, go out. Well, we're spoiled to death. We can get literally any kind of food we want from anywhere across the planet, basically, because we live in the city of Philadelphia, and there's so much different food within, walking distance. But yeah, the mental part of the mental difficulties were the not traveling, and not seeing people. What I did well with, or what I feel I did well with, was I was already in a position where I have this like vast array of things that I've done a lot of, that all contribute to being able to, I can't, after this year, I never want to hear the word pivot again, but being able to pivot my business from, doing primarily technical direction in live theater and live event support and production, to doing it digitally. And, just being like, okay, we're not doing anything, so I'm going to dump all this time and energy into just getting people to recognize that this is a thing that I do and have done. Whereas, pre-pandemic, I've been doing live streaming and digital production for years, because it's, right in my wheelhouse. It's all on a computer. And I started out of high school in IT, and I know networking, I know cameras, I know, I know sound capture for film, and, so all of these things, are all little parts of digital production. And just by virtue of the fact that I've worked in all of them, I've had a lot of experience in all of them. And I did digital production for a lot of companies that I've worked with in live event, but it's usually just like an add-on. It's usually just like, oh yeah, why don't you just, we'll set up a camera to cover the whole stage, and could you stream it to this website using this software for us? So it's usually just like some little add-on, or, could you record this whole thing and we'll release it on our website as a movie. Now it's, I have a client coming up that they usually do a symposium every year, and we're gonna do their whole main presentation in a ballroom with as a hybrid event, with both live guests and live panelists and digital panelists coming in from all over the world. They're an organization that has membership from all across the world, but usually they just fly people into wherever they're doing their yearly show. And now they don't need to, and don't want to. It is a pandemic. It is all over the world. They don't want to bring people in from France and the UK and Africa and Asia, and so they don't want to bring people in for these panels, and they don't want to bring guests in. Well, what do we do? How do we do this? And I had a meeting with them the other day, and I'm like, this is literally what we do now. Like, this isn't hard.
And how do you feel about the richness that it adds to the table, to the palate? Personally, how do you feel that it is a richer buffet?
It's a much more accessible buffet. That's what I like about it.
Do you think there's richness in the combination of the in-person and the streaming, or the
I've always, across the course of my career, been building in more and more digital elements to productions. This going back to one of the first places I worked in live theater was Walking Fish Theater here in Philadelphia. And, we had a projector, and we had a Mac, and we had a 24 channel lighting system. And how do you do intricate sets and productions and lighting in such a small space with no budget? Well, I've always been pushing in more and more digital content, like I did a Christmas show, and I literally built a living room set in digital 3-dimensional space and projected it into the room on the walls. One of the first productions I ever did in Philadelphia was a piece where the actors it was a multimedia piece. So we had actors who were ghosts, but the ghosts were supposed to be in the audience. And so I literally, this was many years ago. This had to be 2005-ish.
Was this Walking Fish?
No, this was actually right over at the Headlong Dance Studios was where it was put up, but it was a dance piece for half of it after the intermission, and the beginning part of it was a drama piece. What was the name of that? At any rate, the actors, I filmed them in my photo studio, and then projected them into the space, into these seats that were in amongst the audience. But I projected them onto the seats in such a way that they looked like they were in the same waiting room as the audience, and the audience was sat as if it was a waiting room. So yeah, always been doing that kind of thing.
If there's a problem that you're trying to solve, like say the one you just described, was that knowledge that you had, or did you just go out and find it? Did you just figure it out?
Little column A, little column B. So I had the knowledge to film people. I had the knowledge to know how to light them and film them in such a way that I could project them into the space. I didn't know how to, so this is a rectangular space. If we're, looking down on it, it's, rectangular like this, and the audience was sat around the outside and then also on a set of chairs in the middle, like an actual doctor's waiting room. And the ghost actors were in random spots around the outside. And so I didn't know how I was going to accomplish that initially, but we accomplished it with, if I recall correctly, 4 projectors. And at the time, computers weren't really capable of driving more than one external device at a time. So I used a piece of technology called Matrox screen splitter, was designed to take one signal out of your computer and make it into a virtually ultra wide monitor. Basically, it made the computer thought it was a monitor that was 4 monitors wide. And then I split that signal up to the 3 different projectors, and then used the placement of the projections on the different monitors to place the characters, the ghost characters.
So it feels like your experience in IT has, certainly gave you a running head start on making a lot of the connections.
Yeah. There's in IT, you figure out, I would say that the IT work helps me to figure out how to communicate, like I know it can be done, into here's how we do it, and then figuring out multiple ways of communicating here's how we do it, until the person I'm working with or people I'm working with understand what it is I'm saying. Because you can always, get really out there when you're trying to come up with these solutions, and then you have to break it down for people who haven't spent as long, thinking about this kind of thing.
Right, or thinking in that way. What do you think, if anything, keeps you awake? Or maybe better phrase, what is the problem? Okay, I'll split it up into 2 questions. Is there anything that does bother you enough to that it's gnawing at you that you want to go after?
Constantly, yeah.
Because I'm thinking, I bet, yeah.
No, I take that Raven personality into all of my work. I'm highly active in Philadelphia politics, and I'm constantly nudging and pestering and bothering the people in city government, because all problems are local problems at the end of the day. You look at anything, you look at homelessness, you look at gun violence, you look at education, all problems become local problems, and can be solved locally a lot, not necessarily easier, but more expediently and with less effort locally. That's not to say that, go ahead.
No, you
that's not to say that the problems shouldn't have, say, a national solution or a global solution, but just to say that the problems do come down to local, and if you're going to solve a problem, you're going to have to play with people locally as much as anywhere else.
Have you ever thought about running for office?
I have. For a long time, I had, as a quasi joke, on my Twitter, you can change the display name on your Twitter, James Jackson for mayor, as my Twitter handle. And it says BLM party, Antifa party, because those would, I'm an independent. As far as politically, I don't like the party politics of Republicans or Democrats. For whatever it's worth, I obviously align a lot more with progressive politics. But I thought about it. I don't know that it would work. Some people I rub the wrong way really easily, and so there's that person, that popularity contest aspect of running for office that I'm not sure I would do well with.
The politics part of it.
No, politics is a different thing to me, anyway.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm great at pestering the crap out of, say, Isaiah Thomas. We get along politically very well, but I still pester the crap out of him and constantly tell him, hey, you're doing this wrong, pay attention. And I can figure out ways to say something that somebody will listen to. my wife has been watching a lot of Survivor lately as her guilty pleasure TV, and it's the part where, on initial meeting, people decide whether or not they like you. I don't play that very well, and I very easily rub people the wrong way. In an initial like person to person type meeting. So I don't know if I could ever generate the kind of goodwill that is required to be a politician.
Do you think that, and I'm reacting that way because do you think, what do you think that is that you imagine people are picking up? And I say that because I don't see that at all.
I don't know what it is. I've definitely I one of the things is I'm very I have a way of stating things that people take it as I'm like pretending I'm an expert or being an expert at something that I don't actually really have any idea of how to do. I don't actually do that. I will try to do things that I don't have any idea how to do, but I won't make any pretend that I know how to do them.
Hang a shingle for that.
Right. But yeah, like, going into a production, for instance, and as a technical director, you as a good technical director will take out insurance on their own business if they're doing technical direction for live theater where there's an audience, because everything that you build, it's your liability if somebody gets injured on that, right? Mm-hmm. So I've gone into productions where we're building site-specific stuff, and I'm building the audience risers. Well, now I'm also responsible for literally everybody that's in the audience, even in the case of an emergency. So I need to be very aware and cognizant of escape routes and the rules and regulations around those sort of things. And I can't count the number of times I've had arguments with producers about, no, you can't put a chair there. It's an escape route. If, God forbid the building catches on fire, and it's not likely to, but if the building catches on fire, somebody gets injured, that's my butt on the line, not yours. Like, I'm the one that's going to be sued for blocking that exit way. And so it's things like that. Like I will just, I actually know what I'm talking about sometimes. And then therefore, and then people who have been around a thing for a long time and sort of know what they're talking about will get mad because I'll state it very matter-of-factly and won't allow any wiggle room for, I believe I do it on things that are important. Maybe I just am not always picking the most important battles. I don't know.
I don't know. It sounds like, yeah, you're solving a problem, your job, and sometimes that's not what people want to hear. Right? But that's not what you're getting paid for. You're getting paid to make sure people are okay. So making the world a better place. So, well, I hear the clock chiming 6, James, and I know you've had a long day working hard for the city of Philadelphia and making sure that things happen on a local level. And I really appreciate the work you're doing. And I thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come and talk to us today, to get to know so much about you. There's so many aspects of your life, just as you said in your bio, that are so interesting, that I'm glad we got the chance to talk to you. So thank you so much. And I'll be tuning in for coffee talk, and you all should too, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. And I think we posted everything in about Light Thief and Coffee Chat in the chat, but I'll make sure when we repost it, James, for the audience, that everybody knows where to find you.
That'd be great. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing for everybody.
Well, I appreciate the recognition and the time to talk. I appreciate being here. So thanks for having me on.
And I'm not convinced you shouldn't keep telling stories.
No,
I want to hear more
always
stories.
Tell stories. I'll always tell stories. That's that's just part of who I am at this point.
Yeah, a great deal of ease with the storytelling. Well, be well. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And thanks to all of you for being here. Next week, which is May the 8th, Anna Corrali, who is a visual designer, a set and video artist, and she's worked on many productions here in Philadelphia for the Pig Iron Theater Company, and she's done a lot of shows for the IRC as well. And working up in New York, we're going to talk to her about her years in visual design, which she's working on now, the book she's working on now. And I hope that you'll join us next Saturday at 5 p.m. For a conversation with set designer and visual artist Anna Corrali. And in the week ahead, just wishing you a very good week. Be safe, get your vaccine, and happy days to you all.